Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome everyone to the Ummahpreneur live podcast. Well, actually, this one is not live. It's going to be a recorded episode. And honestly, I'm bringing you a few special guests that I handpicked that were some of the best guests that I had on this podcast previously. And I wanted to bring them back on so we can have another discussion, maybe share with you a little bit more of their wisdom and insights. And with me today, none other than Dr. Marwa Assar. Marwa, welcome to the podcast. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you. I'm happy to be back.
It's definitely an honor and a pleasure to have you. And for those of you who maybe didn't listen to the first episode, to give you an idea of what Dr. Marwa does. So she's a psycho-spiritual teacher. She's the founder of the Home Institute, where she focuses on providing spiritual, mental, and emotional transformation rooted in Islamic teachings and approached through an Islamic psychological lens. So a very interesting guest with me, mashallah, who does amazing work. I'm a huge fan of her work and what she's doing. So I want to bring her on. I want to have a frank, clear discussion today about a few different topics that we didn't plan. This is going to be, off the cuff, and we're really just going to have a nice little chat here. So are you ready for this, Marwa?
Yep, I'm ready.
Let's do it. So recently you were on a trip to Turkey. Mm-hmm. You were taking a little bit of a vacation, enjoying yourself, mashallah, and you even went to Spain. So I think I would like to start there because a lot of entrepreneurs, that might listen to this podcast, they might think to themselves, like, you know what, one of the cool things about having a business is maybe a little bit more freedom, maybe a little bit more ability to travel. So tell us about that. How was it traveling for you? Did you put your business on pause entirely, or what did you do to accommodate that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I am used to traveling while working, and a lot of times when I do travel, I'm still working. This was actually the first time where I took like an extended time away from work. Okay. Where, the first part of the trip I was working, and then I actually went through my own personal, challenges, and it was just a lot at once for me to kind of handle. So I said to myself, you know what, this is a perfect time for me to just, take some time away and focus on that, on and being present with myself and with the trip, but also with the things that were going on in my life as well. So it is working from home, obviously, and being an entrepreneur, having an online platform is a blessing in so many ways, but it's also a challenge, because it's not like you go to work and then you come home and then that's it. You leave work in a physical space. What's challenging about having an online platform and working via online is that sometimes you don't know when to turn it off, and you don't know. And that's kind of been my challenge a lot of times, is that I'll work a lot and even when I'm traveling. And so for me, it was kind of strange to take this much time, and not be able to work, because it's almost like you feel lucky that you get to work while you travel. So you feel guilty not working. I don't know if you're familiar.
I get that.
It's like, I'm so lucky that I get to work, from home, and I get to travel while I'm working. But then at the same time, you don't realize how much overtime you put in and how much time you are really in work mode. So everything has its challenge and everything has its, blessings,
So tell us about Turkey a little bit, because I want to know. I haven't been. So I just told this to Marwa before we recorded the podcast, and you guys, it might shock you to hear this. I'm inshallah planning a trip to Turkey myself in the next few days. So next week actually, and it's going to be my first time personally visiting a Muslim country. So I want to ask you, Marwa, for you, I'm sure you visited many Muslim countries before, but I want to know, as a Muslim that goes to Muslim countries, because I'm someone who was raised in the West, okay? And one thing that I personally struggle with is that I always feel like I'm the other, if that makes sense, okay? And so I want to know, and I'm really excited to find out, but I want to know, based on your experience, what is it like when you go to countries like Turkey? Is there a difference? And does it actually does it have an impact on your imaan in any way?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you asked this. It's a reflection that I shared a lot with my family, which is this, in the US, we're the minority as Muslims, right? And even praying in public, or, it just, you do feel like the other, so it is, I always say that, when you go to Turkey, you feel pride in being a Muslim. And why I say that, well, number one, I love how they preserve Islamic history, and, they're really big on, just just really bringing that that Islamic history to light. If they preserve our relics and in the museum there, and so it just fills you up with pride. But when you're in a Muslim country and there's an adhan 5 times a day, it's like you don't feel like the other. You feel like this is the norm. Where you walk around and so many people are hijabi. I mean, Turkey's pretty diverse. Not everyone is hijabi there. It's not like Saudi, but you definitely do feel this sense of not a stranger, and you feel this sense of comfort that comes from not being the minority, where you can, in Jummah, for example, people, the mosques are full fast. So people just roll their carpets on the floor outside the mosque and start praying. So the streets are filled with worshipers, and it's such a beautiful feeling. So you definitely do feel like, oh, so this is what it's like to not be the minority,
That's beautiful, mashallah. I'm so excited to experience that.
Inshallah, yeah.
And you're someone who very much works with, Muslims that are, I'm guessing, are the majority living in the West, your students, or is it all over the world?
It's all over, but still considered the West. Like UK is considered the West, right?
So non-Muslim countries.
Non-Muslim countries, predominantly. Yeah.
What have you found to be kind of the biggest challenge that Muslims are currently facing living in non-Muslim countries, in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. I think it's holding on to our values. It's to owning who we are, despite the conversation about us and the narrative in people's minds about what Muslims are and what Islam is about. And I think that, it's really that. It's really the struggle to. This is gonna sound like, maybe harsh, but I think there is a spiritual crisis in the world. I think we are struggling to connect to the beauty of the truth of Islam in a time where falsehood has become so popular and so accepted. And so it's like, it's so hard. I have conversations all the time with people where it's like, that looks easy. This is hard. Holding on in a non-Muslim country in the West to hold on to our values. It's a struggle. And it's like, sometimes it's like, why do I always have to be struggling? Why do I always have to stand out? And this is what's happening to a lot of Muslims, and not just the youth anymore. It's happening to people in their 20s and their 30s, even older, where it's like the struggle to stay rooted in our values, despite appearing strange, has become emotionally draining, I think, for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. I can completely relate to that personally, Marwa. And to be honest with you, even for myself, and I think this is where, sometimes we feel like it's taboo to share when we're in the spotlight. Mm-hmm. But even for myself, for someone, and I mean, I thank Allah every single day, alhamdulillah, that I have built myself a business and an atmosphere that allows me to always be grounded in Islam, in the way that Ummahpreneur is a place where I get to work with Muslims. I get to always kind of push myself. And even in those days where I'm not necessarily feeling it, quote unquote, I still have to kind of go out there and, interact and with Muslims and be a Muslim. And I know it sounds weird to say be a Muslim, but I mean, when you're around non-Muslims, you can do whatever, but to be a Muslim and to, just remember, let's think about how we can incorporate Islam into this, and everything that goes into that. And when I, for example, create content and I have to think, okay, how can we relate this back to our deen? And I thank Allah SWT that I'm in that position, because it's kind of like a way for me to always remain grounded within that, right?
Yeah.
Especially being in a place and then a situation where it's so easy to lose that grounding. And I think that's one of the major things that you help with, and one of the reasons why a lot of people come to you, which is really beautiful, and why I love what it is that you do, mashallah. And you know how much appreciation I have for it, because you are someone who I think sees that issue and sees this problem and thought to herself, what is it that I can do, taking my knowledge and my experience and my abilities, what can I do to help make my own impact on this problem here, make it a little bit better, right? And that's what you're doing through the Home Institute, mashallah. And so I want to ask you, for someone that maybe doesn't even have that grounding, right? Because I have that, and even sometimes I struggle. For you, what has been like the biggest difference maker, or the biggest kind of thing for you that has allowed you to really hold strong to the deen, right? Even for someone like yourself who did grow up in a non-Muslim country.
You know, first I want to say I really appreciate your vulnerability in sharing that. You know, something that I think I'm actually working on my book right now, and I was just writing the part about vulnerability. And you know, it's a rough draft, so I don't know how much of it is going to still stay. But I was just openly reflecting on this concept of vulnerability and how it's missing from people in positions of leadership who have platforms like you know, who, you know, you're using Islam and you're utilizing, you know, you're grounding everything in Islam, right? And you're relating it back to Islam, and you're empowering Muslims. So I'm same thing. Like, people look at me and they might think, you know, or even scholars, you learn from scholars and people think, okay, they have it all together, right? And so I'm really big on vulnerability because, you know, we have to see the imperfection even in those who are teaching us, you know. And I tell my students all the time, I say, I'm a work in progress. I am a work in progress constantly. I'm working on myself just like you are. And I have, you know, spiritual highs and spiritual lows. And I don't think that, you know, there's this place where you arrive. There's no place where you arrive where it's like, oh, you know, welcome to piety. You know, it's not. There's no arrival with religiousness, with piety. Everyone is on their own path with Allah SWT. So I just wanted to, you know, thank you for being vulnerable and saying that, you know, it is a struggle to stay grounded. And I can relate to the fact that this work is a reminder to ourselves first, right? When you're doing a video or you're doing a reminder, you're remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it is helpful, and I feel the same way. Can you repeat though the question now that I started with that?
Yeah, no, for sure. I appreciate you saying that. So my question to you was, how do you overcome that actually? Like, I want to know, what is it that you do, or what have you found to be, you know, I know there's probably not one true answer, but what have you found to be helpful to you in maintaining and keeping that grounding for us? And, you know, for all the people who listen to this, even if they're not entrepreneurs, you know, maybe they can learn from that.
So you're asking about for myself, right?
For yourself.
Yeah. So I will tell you this, like, you know, I've struggled spiritually. I don't think it's going to be the last time I struggled spiritually. I think you struggle spiritually until your last breath. And I think it's just different kinds of struggles because it's all a teaching experience, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us. But for me, I think honesty is really important. I mean, honesty is important, not just for me, but honesty is just, you know, like when it comes to my spiritual struggles. So like, if I don't understand something with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I tell him, Ya Allah, I don't understand. If I am getting frustrated or impatient, I say, Ya Allah, I'm impatient. I don't know what to do. You know, if I feel like, let's say I'm struggling with certain aspects, you know, I tell Allah, and I don't shame. I mean, I worked on not shaming myself. You know why? Because like there's this idea that, okay, like if you wear hijab, you're never going to get a thought of, oh man, I wish I could not wear hijab. you know, or that if you pray, that you're never going to get a thought that says, oh, you know, I don't want to pray. I don't feel like praying. That, you know, if you are, you have like this strong imaan and you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you believe in all the tenets, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have doubts, right?
Correct.
So I believe in the coexistence of all of these aspects. I believe you can love Allah and believe in Allah and still go to him with your confusion. I believe you can love hijab and believe in the understanding of hijab and still sometimes not want to wear it. You know, I believe that you can understand the power of prayer and you know you need it in your heart and still have those emotional experiences where it's so heavy for you to go to pray. So for me, it's like Allah already knows what I'm feeling. So why not just be honest with him about it? And I think inshallah, I think that's, you know, I hope that's what helps me, because throughout my life, because I just don't believe in perfection. I don't believe Allah expects that once you start wearing hijab, that once you start praying, that once you start practicing, that's it. You have to be perfect. And, you know, I noticed this double standard. It's because of this false belief that we have, that we approach religious people and non-religious people so differently, right? Like, for example, if someone is, let's say we view somebody as, you know, in our minds, not religious, right? and they do something like wrong or something, right? We're like, we don't judge in the same way as somebody who is religious wearing hijab or a scholar doing something wrong, right? Then we're like, oh my God, how could they? They're practicing, like, and I think it's this false belief in our minds that like once you start practicing, you've arrived, and there's this, you're supposed to be perfect now. You're not supposed to have doubts. You're not supposed to have. And the reality is then we would be negating the human experience. And that's really what I try to focus on in my work. I don't know why I do this, but I say this all the time to my students for this specific reason. I tell them that I'm not a scholar. I'm a work in progress. I'm constantly saying these things so they understand that like I'm bringing to them things that I learned from my own journey, but also from my background in psychology and Islam. I've always been interested in looking at the spiritual experience through a psychological lens and looking at our psychology through a spiritual experience, right? Through a spiritual lens. So when I look at, okay, prayer and all of these things, I look at the psychological barriers that everybody has at different times in their lives. And you can't negate that. You can't, because then you're negating the human experience, which is where we're at, where Allah put us, you know? Yeah.
I love this. I love this so much. I was like, I have to say, I was kind of like getting a little bit emotional when you were talking, because I don't think I've heard anyone say that before, which is pretty crazy when you think about it, because this is a common human experience that I think every single Muslim has experienced. I think even Muslims living in Muslim countries, which we think, oh, you're living in a Muslim country. You know, it's funny because I have one of my team members, okay, he's my social media manager. His name's Yusuf. He lives in Egypt. And essentially he tells me that in Egypt, and this is just hearsay, so don't take my word for it, guys, but he essentially tells me that in Egypt, like, you will find Muslims doing things that even in the West you won't find Muslims doing. You know what I mean? So he tells me that it's not just because it's a Muslim country that, like, you know, everyone, like, it is what it is. So it's a common human experience. It's not just because you live in a Muslim country that all of a sudden you're perfect. It's not just because you are trying to build something for the Ummah, like Ummahpreneur, for example, that means I'm a perfect Muslim. And I would hate for people to think that, because I am so far away from that. And we try and we strive, but as you mentioned, it is a common human experience to go through all of those highs and lows, and to go through those phases of doubt in all areas, and to feel a certain way. And just like even in entrepreneurship, a lot of times I still, even myself, you know, we talked about it a few times, but I wake up sometimes too and I'm like, man, I should just, like, you know, quit this whole thing and get a job. It's just, I'm done. It's too much. You know, trust me, we all have those days, Marwa. It's happening. But then it's like, okay, no, like, I'm doing this for a reason. And, like, you know, honestly, like, I wouldn't actually do it. That's a bit of an extreme thing, but the thought is there.
Yeah.
And I think that happens for everything that we do in life, you know. And I think the mistake is that sometimes, you know, people take all of those fleeting thoughts maybe a little bit too seriously as well.
Yeah.
You know, where even when we look at now relationships and marriages, right? There are going to be points in your relationship where you're going to think to yourself, maybe I shouldn't be with this person, or maybe I don't want to be with this person for X, Y reason. Just like you might think to yourself, and you might have doubts about your deen. You might have doubts about being an entrepreneur, about everything you do in life. And that is the nature of the human condition, is to question everything. Right. Like, that is literally what makes us human beings, is our ability to question what is around us.
Absolutely.
And I think maybe sometimes people give those thoughts a little bit too much weight and don't take their time to let them marinate and really evaluate them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, you're familiar with the heart over mind ego approach. I talked about it a little bit. The actually one of the first, how do I say this? Where this approach started developing, or its seeds were planted, were, for me, a personal experience first. And it's about realizing this mind isn't as powerful, or not, it's powerful, but it shouldn't be given that high of a position of our inner world. And it's because, you know, I used to, you know, I thought about this in my own life, where I used to give so much power to every thought that came through. So, like, and I was always a very, like, early on, you know, like, I would just, like, very self-critical, always would just, like, what is that? Why do I think that? Why did I think that? You know, why do I feel this way? And what I learned is that our thoughts are they're not meant to be the king. Our mind is not the king. Our mind is not the lead. Remember, I talked about the heart being the lead. Why? Because the mind is powerful, and it's an amazing blessing that Allah SWT gives us. But if you halt every time you have a thought and you give it that much power that you think it's true, then guess what? You're gonna stop. Like, this is why. Okay, so one of the things that I say is part of the heart over mind and ego approach is that if the mind is the lead, you're gonna only walk to Allah so as far as you comprehend. If the ego or the emotions are the lead, you're gonna only walk to Allah as far as you feel good. Okay. If the heart is the lead, you're going to walk to Allah in all conditions, right? So this is like the foundational principle of the heart over mind ego approach, because we think that we should only walk to Allah when we understand. We should only walk to Allah when we feel good. No. So I learned first and foremost from my own life that no, I shouldn't halt every time I have a thought. I shouldn't beat myself up every time I have a negative thought, right? Because you're thinking all the time. And so this is one concept that's really powerful for people to know, is that every thought you have is valid, but it's not real. I mean, it's not true. It's real. You had it. It's a real thought, but it's not true. Meaning, like, okay, let's say you have a thought. Okay, I don't want to, or like, let's say, I don't know, any negative thought that a person can have, like I'm a bad person, or I don't want to pray, right? Okay, it's a valid feeling, right? But do you really not believe in prayer? Do you really not, you know what I mean? So it's like you have to, just because you have a thought doesn't mean that it's the defining factor of your entire worth, your entire being, or what you're going to do in the future, that you still can have a thought and still decide to act otherwise. And so I think in the world we live in, we do give this unhealthy position to the mind. And this is what people are struggling with. People say all the time, I have doubts about Allah, or I can't comprehend this. So they stop. They feel like they can't walk towards Allah,
SubhanAllah. I'm so glad that you're touching upon that. And I would like to share with you something, get your opinion on it. So one thing that I notice is that, I have a few people that I know who are Muslims, who were raised Muslims, but who sometimes stray from the deen. And it happens. And that's something that happens to all human beings. And one phenomenon that happens is, I feel like when someone starts to get into a place where they're living a certain lifestyle, or they're getting accustomed to certain sins or habits that might be sinful, to be able to kind of overcome or reduce their guilt, they will start to rationalize away their belief, if that makes sense. So they'll be, and I've seen this, and the problem is that when other Muslims go to them and drive and kind of like essentially confront them in a very confrontational manner to say, oh, you shouldn't be doing this, for your Muslim, it's like completely wrong. How you don't believe, And I feel like that's not the right approach, because that just makes them feel, well, okay, it's either I believe and I don't do it, or I don't believe and then I do it.
Yeah.
But I think, and this might be a controversial thing to say, I don't know, but I personally think that sometimes we need to have a leaner approach and understand that every person has their own journey. Sometimes people will stray away from the deen, but we never want to make them feel like the door is closed. We never want to let them feel like they have to choose, like it's black and white. Because if Allah SWT is the most forgiving, and He Himself tells us that He will forgive us as long as we repent and we are sincere in our repentance, who are we to not, to close that door for other people by making them feel like, if you're going through a certain phase right now where you're away from the deen, oh, you're not a Muslim, or, you either do this or you're away from it. And they're like, oh, well, then, screw it. I'm not a Muslim then. And they just completely let go, instead of being like, look, I know you're going through a phase right now. I want you to understand that the door is still open. Don't sacrifice your beliefs just to make yourself feel better about it, but know that the door is open and you can go back to it. And kind of have just a better approach in general, a better approach, a more understanding approach, knowing that these people are human beings and allowing them the space to go through phases and to go through what they need to go through as personal experiences, because at the end of the day, we can't control other people, but we can only make them feel that they are welcome if they ever wish
Doors
to
always open.
return. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I'm glad that you touched upon this, because this is a huge issue. And something that I've talked about before too, is that, a lot of times we meet people's imperfection with the perfection of Islam. And I always say, you're not Islam. I'm not Islam. My name is not Islam. Islam is a perfect religion, but I'm a human being. I'm a soul. I'm an imperfect person. So when people come to you with their imperfection, when you meet them with the perfection of Islam and not with another imperfect heart, what essentially you're doing is you're just creating a space where you have promoted their ego to come to the lead. Why? Because any human being, when they bring their imperfection and their vulnerability into a space and they're met with perfection, you feel overwhelmed. You feel less than. So what does the ego, what is the role of the ego? It comes up to preserve your image. It comes up to preserve your that inner security, right? So you're only creating a space where their ego comes up, not their heart. So in that moment, you presented a beautiful perfection of Islam, but guess what? You lost that person's heart. And guess what? Now you're only speaking to their ego. So you lost. So if our efforts are really sincere and we really want to speak to people's hearts, if the heart in you and the heart in other people is the priority, that's what you're going to focus on. And it comes from prioritizing our own hearts first. I always tell my students that, and this is something I felt within me, the more that I worked on my own heart, the more that I wanted to speak to the hearts of others, because you realize that you could be speaking to people's ego or you could be speaking to people's hearts, right? And so absolutely, I think so that's one thing, right? Like, don't meet people with perfection when they bring their imperfection to you. So first, see their heart, validate them. Again, remember, when you validate an experience, it doesn't mean you're saying it's right. You're saying that it's real. It's happening for that person. When you validate somebody and you say, I see that this is happening. I'm sorry that you're going through this, just making them feel seen and heard. That's not you saying, I approve. That's you saying, I see you. I see your heart. I see you. And I still am accepting you. Like, I'm meaning like not accepting your behavior. I'm accepting the heart in you. That most important part within you, that soul, right? Not accepting the behavior, but I see you and your worth and you're still worthy to me, right? And so first, that's what we do. We validate. And then we create a space where that person's ego goes down and their heart starts to come up, because then they feel seen. And when you do that, that's when you create a space where people are more willing to hear the perfection of Islam. So that's one thing. This is going to be a little bit, it's a twofold kind of answer. So
Please keep going.
The next thing is, Islam is about sidq, truthfulness. If you look at even just the what was it called? What's it called? The process of how Islam was revealed, right? The first ayat of the Quran that came down weren't about halal and haram. I mean, it wasn't about the rulings, right? It was about connecting the hearts to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to the reality that awaits them, to the akhirah, to the reality of their purpose, the reality of why they're here, right? It was about softening the heart with that truth. The rulings of no alcohol and hijab and all these things, the outer presentation also of Islam, more so later on, right? And so we don't do that with people. Allah is so much more merciful to us than we are to people, because we expect people to just tell us, you're going to practice, okay, perfection, that's it, right? But that's not the way it is. And everybody's on their own journey. So I would say that Islam came down to reveal truth, and everything about Islam is about sidq, authenticity, truthfulness. And it's about connecting people to truth so that they can live in that truth. And so what we want to do is, foster that in our hearts and the hearts of others. So be truthful with Allah, meaning that if you have one thing that you're doing with Allah, don't lose that, right? Like, let's say like somebody comes to you and they say, I don't want to wear hijab anymore, right? But they're still praying. Tell them, hold on to that. Don't leave that. That's your door. Just be truthful with Allah. Like, if it may, inshallah, you want to come back to wearing hijab, but just be truthful with Allah. Keep the door open with Allah. And there's a story. I'm really bad with remembering names. I remember meanings from like things I learn and I take it with me, but I'm bad with remembering names. But there's a story that one of my teachers taught me, and he said he told me about this man who was a thief, right? And he was basically, him and a group of people they robbed somebody who was traveling through. So they robbed them, and then they were about to sit down and eat. And the man said, "Oh, sorry, I'm not going to eat. I'm fasting." So this man, who is a thief, chose not to eat because he was fasting. Eventually, this man became righteous later on. See, this is why I'm so bad. So then they asked him, "You're a thief. You're fasting." He said, "This is the door that I keep open with Allah." Eventually, this man became a very righteous man later on. So it's a more detailed story. But at the end of the day, I would tell everybody, including myself first, is that you don't answer to anyone but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah knows your own journey. Allah knows what you've been through. Allah knows what you're struggling with. Allah knows what is in your heart, but just be truthful with Allah. It doesn't matter what story and narrative you tell people. It doesn't matter, what explanation you give to people. At the end of the day, just keep a door open with Allah. Just because you took off hijab doesn't mean abandon everything. Keep a door open. If you stop doing one deed, do the deed. Keep being consistent in the deed that you do, that you are able to hold on to, and keep asking Him for help. But keep the door open. But there is no such thing as everyone's perfect. And honestly, I even think the most religious people, right? Like, let's say it's a level, different levels or whatever. Even if you're so religious and you're presenting all of these things and you're outwardly, you're a work in progress too. And you still have things that you have to work on with Allah. And maybe for you, if you are at that level, it is only because of Allah's rahmah towards you. And it's only because of Allah's grace towards you. And this is something that we miss. Like sometimes people, they'll say things like, "Oh, it's so easy for me to fast. It's so easy for me to do this. It's so easy for me to do this." And we have to take a pause and remember that it is only by the grace of Allah that we are able to do those things. Because honestly, and last thing I'm going to say, the line between being practicing, and I learned this from my own life and from working with so many people, is that the line between being practicing and not practicing is so thin. And it is our own illusion that we think it is like, us getting to that? Never. Me taking off hijab? Never. Me not praying? Never. Beware of saying things like that. If something comes easy to you, it's not because of you. It's because of Allah's rahmah towards you.
Mm-hmm. MashaAllah. Thank you so much for dropping those gems, honestly. Loving this episode and the discussions that are coming out of it, MashaAllah. And I think it's something that needs to be heard, because I need to hear that. Like, I need to hear that too sometimes. And, I'm very grateful to hear that from someone like yourself, who her main role is to help others throughout that journey and that process, right? And, I'm really liking that, because I think there's a shift right now that's happening, maybe a generational shift between us who understood essentially all the trials and challenges of coming up right now in modern age, versus maybe our elders who didn't really know and who were a little bit more kind of black and white, if that makes sense. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's what's happening. I mean, I look at that. That's the whole, that's the element of, are you still there?
I'm still there. I'm still with you. Go
sorry.
for it. Yeah. I was just zooming in on it. Go for it.
Yes. No, that's the element of the psychological aspect of the spiritual experience, right? It's that you look at people's upbringing and what contributed to that, right? What contributed to this challenge. And for a lot of people, and a lot of the way that they understood Islam wasn't through a balance of hope and fear. It was through fear, black and white. Do this because it's haram, and do this without any explanation. Even when it comes to
that's pretty much how I was raised personally. Not from my parents, but I was brought into a Muslim school, and it was like, this gets you to hell, this gets you to heaven, and that's it.
Yeah. And that's a big problem, because and I honestly think, I just believe Allah's so merciful, and Allah is if we think we're compassionate towards other human beings, Allah knows how every person was raised. Allah knows how the message of Islam was received and was relayed to them first, and how pure it was relayed to them. right? How truthful was it relate to them? Like, was it relate to them with cultural influences? Like, was it relate to them in a very black and white without Allah's rahmah? Was it relate to them in the absence of love? Right? Many people, and a lot of people in our generation now who grew up with that black and white, do this because haram, do this, don't see Allah's love through so many things. They don't see Allah's love for them. They don't see Allah's love in the rulings. They don't see Allah's love in, it's all about, I feel restricted. It's like almost like, when someone is, doing something and they're restricting themselves, let's say like I don't know, I can't think of an example, but like if you know what it's rooted in, your struggle, you're more likely to continue. But if you're continuing to restrict yourself, right, and you don't have a vision, you don't have a goal, you don't see what it's for, and you don't see Allah's love for you, it's going to be so hard to continue. That's emotionally draining. So sometimes it's about renewing those foundations. How do you see do you see Allah's love for you in all of these things? So I definitely agree. There's a lot of issues that contribute to that. It's upbringing, but it's also, it's the way that we receive these messages that were imbalanced. Like for example, when it comes to parents, right? Like, you always hear about obeying your parents, but you never hear scholars talk about, the amana it is to have children. And how actually parents are going to answer to Allah about raising their children, and how important it is to speak kindly to them and to respect them. And a lot of times it's imbalanced. Same thing with men and women issues. Why is there this increased resentment and anger? Because it wasn't balanced. It was like, so when there's an imbalance, same thing with hope and fear. You talk more about fear and then you don't talk about hope. Guess what? So Islam is about balance, and I think that there was a lot of imbalance for a lot of people.
For you, do you feel like your approach, or let me reword that in a way. I want to know, in your opinion, how do you feel is the best approach for someone that wants to reconnect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Where should they start?
I think it's honesty, to be honest with you. I think it's talking to Allah like He is your friend. I think it's just accepting that imperfection and knowing that Allah's door is open, and filter out the noise. Like, I know this is easier said than done, and I know it's hard to do, but as much as you can, remember that at the end of the day, it's about you and Allah. So yes, people are going to judge. People are going to always judge. People are going to always expect certain things from you. People are going to have this idea of what is religiously, what looks pious, you know what I mean? And what their expectations of you, religiously. But at the end of the day, Allah loves that person I really believe Allah loves that person who's just sincere, because isn't that the essence of everything we do? What's the point? I don't want to say that, but you could be so religious and not doing anything sincerely. So you're, habatat a'malahum, your deeds are, just right. They're not, they don't have value.
So when I think about that, it gives me the shivers, man.
Yeah.
Because it's like, wow. And so many times, I'll be real with you. So there's so many days and so many times, sometimes weeks, where I'm going along and I'm not focused and I'm not conscious about my intention, the intention behind what I'm doing. And I'm someone who discusses that with through Ummahpreneur with my students a lot about, setting the intention to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through your work.
Right.
And, sometimes I can feel literally when I get distracted from that, or I don't actively, consciously implement that every single day. It's very easy to lose that and to just get wrapped up in the day-to-day grind of, okay, I got to make sure everything's running. We got to make those posts and create those things and, do all of those activities that we have to do. And it's a conscious effort. It's a daily conscious effort. It requires daily conscious effort at all times.
Absolutely. And I think that we focus so much on quantity, sometimes even spiritually, but also mentally and emotionally, things that we do for ourselves or personally, productivity wise, we focus so much on quantity. And we do so much, but I think that the difference between somebody who goes to bed feeling nourished and feeling at peace and a person who doesn't feel that way, even though they're both doing the same amount of things, or even this person's doing more, the one who doesn't feel nourished. It's that this disconnect from what we're doing. And it's that intention element. It's that turning inward process and focusing on this great inner world within us rather than the outer world. And, like, if you could just do a few things each day with just deep connection and intention, if we could just focus on that, that brings your world to life. And it also makes you feel enough. A lot of people don't feel enough, even though we're much more comfortable than like our parents' generation in terms of like comforts that we have. We are, we maybe even if somebody's like doing a lot or they feel like they are more successful, whatever, right? Like we are missing this connection to ourselves, because this inner world is where you go to connect to intentions, to the why. This is where meaning comes from, where they, even in psychology, we recognize that people who are meaning driven and purpose driven, they are psychologically better off. They have it promotes their psychological well-being because you're connected to the why. And if we look at the Sahaba and we look at the companions, radiallahu anhum, and the way that they, walk their life, they were very much connected to their intentions. And I think that's what we're missing. And because this is a concept that I teach, is that experiences come and go, but intentions surpass time and place, right? So the value of your action, when you have that intention, when you're connected to the intention, when you intend for Allah, it goes beyond that time. So you did the action, but subhanAllah, you were connected, you feel nourished by that experience. You also feel less detached from the outcome. That's another thing. When you are when you're more connected to your intention, and you see its value in front of Allah, because that's what setting intentions for Allah is that you see its value in front of Allah. You see how it could be pleasing to Allah. So when you do that, and then you do the action, if you're connected to your intentions, you're actually less attached to the outcome, because you're like, I see value in it already. Allah already sees that, and you know that Allah already rewards you for that, right? So, and also you just know the why. You psychologically, you know why you did this. So even if the outcome is not what you had hoped, you still feel content. So we are missing that element. We're so fast paced. We're so like, just, especially with social media and this emphasis on outer presentation, everyone is trying to do a lot. And this is a reminder to myself first, like this is, and it's really important to slow down. And even if you're going to do a few things a day, just make sure that you're connected to your intention and you're connected to the why.
Mm-hmm. That was really beautiful, mashallah. Definitely. And I'm going to take that reminder home too, because, for sure. Like this is something that I need to hear sometimes, because I'm a machine, man. Like I need to breathe sometimes. Like I remember last night, subhanAllah, I was working until like, from morning up until 1 a.m., went to bed, woke up at 6 a.m., hit the gym, back at work right now, just like, just going at it. But at the same time, I don't always do this. I'm doing this now because I'm going on a trip soon. So I want to make sure like everything's taken care of. But I do realize that I can get carried away sometimes with just, how much I do end up working. But I appreciate that.
Will you be working on your trip in Turkey? Or?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I will, but very slightly. So I'm going to bring my laptop with me, and in the mornings and at nights, like when I'm in the hotel, I'm going to check in with my team, make sure things are still running. But what I've done actually to prepare myself is I've created all my content in advance. I've created, we're recording these episodes in advance. So I'm doing all of these actions in advance so that when I'm gone, everything is still running, everything's still going out. And I think that's something that a lot of, entrepreneurs listening to this can leverage, which is, creating content in advance, creating whatever you need to do in your business in advance. And that kind of gives you the room to go and work on anything else you want to work on, or even take a break if you want to, right?
It's true.
Yeah.
I'm going to take note of that.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Alhamdulillah. So that's been a big one for me. But I know, mashallah, I got carried away. We're now up to 45 minutes. I could keep going for hours on this. Honestly, I'm down to keep going for 3 hours, 4 hours on this, but we're going to keep it reasonable here. But let me ask you this. For you right now in the Home Institute, people listening to this, if they want to be a part of it, inshallah, if they want to connect with you, they want to, work with you throughout their journeys of that spiritual reconnection,
Yeah.
Where's the best place for them to go? Where should we lead them exactly?
It's the homeinstitute.org. The highest level of, I call it investment, meaning like, different levels of programs you could join. But the highest level of investment is the God in Me program, because it's a very comprehensive, more long-term program that takes you through, phases of transformation, that gives you not only the spiritual tools, but the psychological tools from an Islamic psychological lens. So that would be the God in Me program.
Awesome. And what I suggest, guys, is go on her website, check it out, look at, mashallah, what she does, and, just what she's built here and the experiences that she's been able to bring to her students. But at the same time, what I want you to do is, if you're really serious about this, go to her Instagram. Is it Dr. Marwa Assar? What's your Instagram handle?
It's at the Doctor of Hearts.
Okay, at the Doctor of Hearts, the DR of Hearts, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so guys, go to Instagram at the DR of Hearts, give her a follow, send her a message, be like, I really like the episode. Can we get on a call? I'm interested in your program. Do me a favor and do that if you're interested, because trust me, it is worth it. It is, I've personally had the opportunity to look at what's inside and help Marwa through her process a little bit. And mashallah, I can tell you that I'm 100% putting my stamp and seal certification on this, because it is incredible. So go check it out, guys. Follow her on Instagram, send her a message, tell her, I want to be in this program. Tell me more about it. Get on a call. There's no obligation to do anything, but please go ahead and do it. Because if you resonated with this conversation today, trust me, we haven't even scratched the surface of, everything that, we need to know as Muslims, and how do we overcome those challenges, and how do we reconnect with Allah SWT. So please do yourself a favor, or maybe send this podcast or episode to someone who could benefit from listening to this, and have them reach out to Dr. Marwa, because they will be in good hands, inshallah. And Marwa, thank you so much for just joining me on this episode today. It was incredible.
Well, thank you for having me. This was really nice. Thank you.
Yeah, it was an honor to have you. And inshallah, hopefully maybe we'll have you again for a third time, because every time I have you on, it's absolutely incredible.
Inshallah. I love being on your podcast and really appreciate all the work that you do. So happy to be here.
Alhamdulillah. Really appreciate you, Marwa. Thank you so much. So guys, you know the drill. If you did enjoy this podcast and this episode, just go ahead and give us a rating and review. Let us know why you love this podcast. Share it with the people that you know. And we'll see you next week, inshallah. Take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.